Sir, you need to see this. Who is your father?
Our dad is Kang Joon-Seok.
The gate alarm screamed through the compound at 11:47 p.m., and Kang Tae-Hyun was already moving before the second guard finished shouting into his radio. He crossed the marble hallway in 4 strides, one hand tightening around the grip of the pistol tucked at his back, his mind running through every enemy who might be desperate enough, or stupid enough, to test his front gate on a night like this. Rain hammered the security cameras into gray static. Thunder rolled somewhere over the hills. He reached the front doors just as his head of security, detective, no, his own man, Officer Han threw them open, breathless. "Sir, you need to see this." Tae-Hyun stepped out into the rain without an umbrella, without a jacket, because in 20 years of running one of the most feared organizations in Seoul, hesitation had never once kept him alive. What kept him alive was moving toward the danger before the danger finished forming. But there was no danger standing at his gate. There were 3 children. The oldest, a girl who could not have been older than 8, stood with her arms wrapped protectively around a smaller boy and an even smaller girl. All 3 were soaked to the bone. The boy's teeth chattered. The smallest one, barely more than a toddler, had her face buried in the older girl's side, her small body trembling. No umbrella. No coats. No adult in sight, not on the street, not in the shadows, not anywhere the security cameras could reach. "Clear the street," Tae-Hyun ordered without looking away from them. "Now." Guards fanned out into the rain, weapons lowered but ready, scanning rooftops, scanning parked cars, scanning anything that could be hiding a trap. Tae-Hyun had built his empire on the assumption that nothing was ever what it looked like. A child on a doorstep could be a diversion. A trap could wear the smallest, most innocent face imaginable. He crouched down anyway, closing the distance between himself and the girl, keeping his voice low, steady, stripped of the authority that made grown men flinch. "What are you doing out here?" The girl lifted her chin. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice didn't shake. "Are you Kang Tae-Hyun?" Every guard within earshot went still. "Who told you that name?" he asked. She reached into the collar of her soaked jacket and pulled out a small envelope, creased and damp, but intact, sealed in plastic like someone had taken great care to protect it from exactly this kind of night. She held it out to him with both hands, the way a child hands over something they've been told is important. "Our dad said if anything happened to him, we had to find you. He said don't give this to anyone else, only you." Tae-Hyun took the envelope. His fingers were steady, his pulse was not. He opened it right there in the rain, tilting it toward the porch light. Inside was a single slip of paper, and on it, in handwriting he hadn't seen in 20 years, handwriting he had memorized from birthday cards and homework margins, and one goodbye note that had never made sense until this exact moment, was his own name. Kang Tae-Hyun. Nothing else, no explanation, no signature he needed because he already recognized the hand that wrote it. "Who is your father?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. The girl looked at her siblings, then back at him, like she was deciding whether he had earned the answer. "Our dad is Kang Joon-Seok." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Kang Tae-Hyun felt the ground shift under him, and it had nothing to do with the storm. If you're just joining this channel, welcome. Hit that subscribe button now, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated, and you will not want to miss a single twist. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from tonight. Now, back to the story. Kang Joon-Seok had been dead for 20 years. Tae-Hyun had stood at the funeral himself, had watched the casket lowered into frozen ground, had spent 2 decades believing his older brother's death was the one immovable fact in a life built on lies and violence. It was the wound he never let heal because healing felt like forgetting, and forgetting felt like betrayal. And now 3 children were standing on his porch, claiming to be his brothers. "Bring them inside," he said. "Get them dry, get them fed. Nobody touches them, nobody questions them without me in the room." The mansion swallowed the children whole, vast marble floors, silent hallways, staff who moved like ghosts and stared like the children were ghosts too. Maya held her siblings' hands the entire walk inside, refusing to let go even when a housekeeper offered to carry the youngest. "I've got her," Maya said. "I always carry her." Noah, the middle child, said nothing. He watched everything, the cameras mounted in the corners, the guards stationed at every door, the particular way the housekeeper avoided Tae-Hyun's eyes. 6 years old, and already cataloging a world most adults would take years to understand. Lily, the youngest, only cried until someone put a warm towel around her shoulders, and then she quieted, staring up at the enormous chandelier above the entryway like it was the first beautiful thing she'd seen in days. Tae-Hyun didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study with the note in front of him, running forensic verification he didn't need, because he already knew his brother's handwriting the way he knew his own heartbeat. By morning, he had a full investigation launched. Birth records, hospital records, a mother's name that meant nothing to him, a father listed plainly as Kang Joon-Seok, with a death date that made no sense if the man had fathered a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old after he was supposedly already in the ground. "The records are clean," his lawyer told him 2 days later, sliding a folder across the desk. "Too clean. Whoever built this paper trail knew exactly what they were doing." Meaning either your brother really is their father, and somebody has spent years protecting that secret with professional precision, or somebody wants you to believe that badly enough to fake it perfectly. Tae-Hyun stared at the folder without opening it. Find out which. While the investigation churned, the children began, slowly, to occupy his house. Maya remained wary of him, watching him the way she watched everyone, like a girl who had learned that adults disappeared, that promises broke, that the only person she could fully trust was herself. She kept a small backpack packed by her bed every night, ready to run if she had to. "You don't need to do that here," Tae-Hyun told her one evening, finding her repacking it for the 3rd time that week. "You don't know that," she said, not unkindly, just factually. "Nobody knows that until it's too late." Noah started following him. Not obviously, he was too smart for that, but Tae-Hyun would catch him standing at the edge of a doorway. Watching him sign documents, watching him speak with his men, absorbing the shape of a world he didn't understand yet, but clearly intended to. "Why do all your men call you sir?" Noah asked one afternoon, apropos of nothing, from the corner of the study. "Because I'm in charge of them. Like a boss." Something like that. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a much older person. "Our dad said you were important. He said you were the only person who could keep us safe if something happened." Tae-Hyun's pen stopped moving. "When did he say that?" Noah shrugged, already losing interest, already moving on to the next thing his 6-year-old attention had caught. "I don't remember before." It was Lily who broke through first, because Lily didn't carry the same guarded weight her siblings did. She found Tae-Hyun in the garden one morning, marched up to him with the fearless confidence only a 4-year-old possesses, and held up a flower she'd picked from his carefully maintained rose bed. "This is for you." He took it because refusing felt suddenly, absurdly impossible. "Thank you." "Are you my uncle?" The question landed like a blade between his ribs. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "We're trying to find out." "I hope you are," Lily said simply, and then ran off to chase a butterfly, leaving him standing there holding a rose with thorns he hadn't bothered to feel. That night, going through a box of the children's belongings that had been left with them, a few changes of clothes, a stuffed rabbit missing one eye, a small tin of photographs, Tae-Hyun found the detail that changed everything. A photograph, old and creased, of a woman he didn't recognize standing beside a much younger version of his brother. Behind them, barely visible, was the corner of a building Tae-Hyun knew intimately, the lake house. His family's lake house, the one that had been sold off in the chaos after his brother's supposed death, The one nobody outside his immediate family should have had any photograph of it all. Someone had prepared these children to find him specifically. Someone had known things only a member of his own family could know. The investigation into his brother's death, reopened after 20 years, produced answers faster than Tae-Hyun expected and slower than his patience could bear. Records that had once seemed airtight now revealed gaps. A death certificate signed by a doctor who, records showed, had left the country the following year and never returned. A burial that had happened with unusual speed. A family lawyer, since retired, who had handled the estate with instructions that, on closer reading, seemed designed less to settle an estate and more to seal a story shut. Somebody paid for this to disappear cleanly, his investigator told him. 20 years ago, somebody had the money and the reach to bury the truth as thoroughly as they buried the body, assuming there was a body. You're telling me my brother might not have died. I'm telling you the paperwork says he did, and the paperwork was clearly built by someone who wanted that version of events to be permanent. Maya, when questioned gently, revealed more than she realized she was revealing. Dad said if anything happened, we had to remember 3 things. Your name, that we had to trust you, and that we should never tell anyone else about him, not even you unless you figured it out yourself. Figured what out? Maya hesitated, and for a moment Tae-Hyun saw something flicker behind her 8-year-old composure, not confusion, but restraint. A child holding a truth too large for her own understanding, guarding it exactly the way she'd been told to. I don't know the whole thing, she said. Just pieces. Dad said you'd understand once you saw enough of them. Piece by piece, the evidence accumulated toward a single, devastating conclusion. Kang Joon-Seok had not died 20 years ago. He had disappeared, deliberately, protected by people with enough power to fabricate a death and enforce its silence for 2 decades. And now, for reasons the evidence didn't yet explain, he had sent his children to the one person he'd trusted to protect them when he no longer could. Tae-Hyun believed, for one brief and almost peaceful week, that he had solved it. His brother was alive somewhere, in hiding, and had finally reached out in the only way he safely could, through his children. He was wrong, and the discovery of exactly how wrong reshaped everything he thought he understood about his own family. Here's a question for you before we go any further. If you found out someone in your family had been hiding for 20 years, would you want to know why, no matter how painful the answer? Type yes in the comments if you're staying till the end of this one, because the truth is about to get a lot harder to hear. Let's continue. The unraveling began with a woman's name Tae-Hyun's investigator surfaced almost by accident, buried in an old employment record from the lake house staff. A nanny named Song Hye-rin, employed by the Kang family the year before Joon-Seok's supposed death, dismissed abruptly with a severance payment large enough to buy her permanent silence. Tae-Hyun found her, eventually, living quietly 2 provinces away under a different surname. She was in her 60s now, and when he showed her the photograph from the tin, her hands trembled around the edges of it. I told him not to send them, she said quietly. I told him it was too dangerous, even after all this time, but he said you deserved to know before it was too late for him to tell you himself. Know what? She looked at him for a long moment, weighing 20 years of silence against whatever debt she felt she still owed a man who had trusted her with his family's most guarded secret. Your brother didn't disappear to protect himself from your father's enemies, she said. He disappeared to protect you, and to protect the truth about your mother, which your father buried the same year he buried your brother's death certificate. The truth, when it finally arrived in full, was not the truth Tae-Hyun had spent his life defending. His father, the man he had modeled himself after, the man whose empire he had inherited and expanded and never once questioned, had not simply been a hard, ambitious man building a legacy. He had made choices 20 years earlier that had shattered his own family from the inside. Choices involving a woman who was not the mother Tae-Hyun had grown up believing was his, a truth Joon-Seok had discovered as a young man and refused to let their father erase. Joon-Seok hadn't died protecting the family's secrets. He had been forced into hiding because he had threatened to expose them, and their father had chosen silencing his own son over risking the truth reaching Tae-Hyun, who was still young enough, still moldable enough, to be shaped into exactly the kind of heir their father wanted. He loved you enough to disappear rather than let you grow up in a war you didn't choose, Hyun told him. And he loved you enough, 20 years later, dying and out of options, to send you the only 3 people left who mattered more to him than his own safety. Tae-Hyun sat with that truth for a long time, alone, in a study that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. Years passed the way years do when grief and purpose share the same house, quietly, then all at once. Tae-Hyun formalized guardianship of the 3 children with a determination that surprised even his closest men who had never once seen him fight this hard for anything that couldn't be measured in territory or leverage. The relationship didn't transform overnight, and Tae-Hyun never pretended it did. There were arguments over bedtimes and homework, and Maya's insistence on handling things herself long after she no longer needed to. There were nights Noah refused to speak to him after catching a glimpse of a world Tae-Hyun had tried and failed to keep separate from their childhood. There was a birthday Tae-Hyun missed because of an emergency in Busan, and the silent, wounded look on Lily's face when he finally came home that told him more than any confrontation could have. But there were also mornings Maya sat beside him at breakfast without being asked, quietly narrating her day the way children do when they've decided, without announcement, that someone is finally safe to talk to. There was Noah, at 10, asking him serious questions about responsibility and consequence that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the kind of man he wanted to become. There was Lily, at 7, falling asleep against his shoulder during a thunderstorm, unafraid in a way she'd never quite managed her first night in that house. He built walls around them that his father had never built around him. Walls made of distance from the parts of his world that could hurt them. Walls made of ordinary Tuesdays and school recitals and terrible home-cooked dinners. He insisted on making himself despite a full kitchen staff waiting to do it properly. "You're not very good at this," Maya told him once, 12 years old and unimpressed by his attempt at pancakes. "I'm aware. Dad would have laughed at you." It was the first time in years she'd mentioned Joon-Seok without her voice catching, and Tae-Hyun understood, standing there covered in flour, that something in her had finally begun to heal. The years kept moving. Adolescence brought new versions of old struggles, Maya's fierce independence sharpening into genuine leadership as she took first position in her class and refused every offer of help Tae-Hyun tried to extend. Noah's quiet observation deepening into genuine intellect, a boy who noticed patterns in numbers the way he'd once noticed patterns in guarded men's faces. Lily's affection never dimmed, though it matured into something steadier, less desperate for reassurance, more simply present. And through all of it, in ways none of them fully articulated, fragments of their beginning lingered. Maya kept the original envelope in a drawer she never opened, but never let anyone throw away. Noah kept the habit of watching rooms before entering them, a childhood survival instinct he never quite unlearned. Lily kept the one-eyed stuffed rabbit on her bed long after most children would have outgrown it, because it was the last thing that had traveled with her from a life she barely remembered, and a father she'd been too young to properly know. We're at the halfway point of tonight's story, and if this family has already found a place in your heart, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens when these 3 finally grow up and start uncovering the truth for themselves. Like this video if you want more stories like this one. Now, let's keep going. Time jumped forward the way it does in lives built on unanswered questions, slowly through the ordinary days, and suddenly across the milestone ones. Maya, 26 now, had become a sharp, formidable young woman working in corporate law, still fiercely protective of her siblings, still carrying herself like someone who had once learned the hard way that safety could disappear in an instant. Noah, 24, had built a quiet, brilliant career in finance, the same analytical mind that once cataloged guarded men's expressions, now dismantling market patterns for a living. Lily, 22, had grown into a warm, expressive young woman studying to become a child psychologist, drawn, without ever quite admitting why, to understanding children who'd lived through exactly the kind of upheaval she barely remembered surviving herself. They had built lives of their own, separate identities beyond the mansion that had raised them, and Tae-Hyun, older now, grayer, but no less formidable, had learned, slowly and imperfectly, how to let them go without letting go of them entirely. It was Maya who found the first thread, purely by accident, reviewing an old case file at her firm that referenced a property transaction 2 decades old. A lake house, sold under unusual circumstances, its proceeds routed through an account that, buried under layers of legal language, traced back to their grandfather. It was Noah who found the second thread, months later, cross-referencing financial records for an unrelated project and noticing a pattern of payments stretching back 22 years. Quiet transfers to a woman whose name meant nothing to him until he mentioned it to Maya and watched her face go pale. It was Lily who supplied the final piece, the one nobody else could have provided, because it wasn't buried in any document. It was a memory, faint and half-formed, that surfaced one evening while she was helping a young client at her practicum process a fragmented childhood memory of their own. "I remember a woman," Lily said slowly, sitting with her siblings that night, piecing together a memory she'd never had reason to examine before. "Before Tae-Hyun, before all of this, a woman who used to sing to me, I always thought it was a dream." "What did she look like?" Maya asked, already knowing, somehow, that the answer mattered more than either of them understood yet. "I don't know, but I remember her voice, and I remember she cried a lot near the end." The 3 pieces connected in a way none of them could ignore. A lake house, a woman receiving quiet payments for 2 decades, a fragmented memory of someone who had cared for Lily before their arrival at Tae-Hyun's door and had never been mentioned since. The truth their father had died protecting, the truth their grandfather had buried, was not simply about Joon-Seok's disappearance. It reached further back, into a secret about their own mother, a secret that changed not just what they understood about their arrival 20 years ago, but who they had always been. They brought it to Tae-Hyun together. The 3 of them sitting across from him in the same study where he'd once found a photograph that started this entire unraveling, and watched him go very still as they laid out what they'd found. "There's more," he admitted quietly, after a long silence. "I've known part of it for years. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure you needed to carry it. I see now that decision wasn't mine to make." He told them everything then. The truth Hyrin had given him decades earlier. The truth about their grandfather's choices, about Joon-Seok's exile, about a family built on secrets he had spent their entire childhood trying, imperfectly, to shield them from. But even that truth had one layer left, and it was Maya's legal instincts that finally pulled it fully into the light. The woman receiving payments for 2 decades, the woman from Lily's fragmented memory, was not simply their mother's caretaker, as the paper trail had been carefully constructed to suggest. She was their mother's sister, their aunt, and she had been paid, quietly and consistently, to remain silent about the true circumstances of their mother's death, which had not been the illness the family had always been told, but the consequence of their grandfather's ruthless efforts to sever Joon-Seok's family from any claim on the Kang legacy before he could be silenced entirely. Their father hadn't simply sent them to Tae-Hyun to protect them from unnamed danger. He had sent them because he had discovered, in his final months, exactly how far their grandfather had gone to erase them. And Tae-Hyun, the one person in that family who had never been told the whole truth, the one person their grandfather had never fully corrupted, was the only person left who could be trusted to finish the protection Joon-Seok could no longer provide. The envelope had never simply been an address. It had been a test, and a hope, and a father's final act of faith that his younger brother would choose them over the empire built on their erasure. If your chest is tight right now, you're not alone. Drop a heart in the comments if this one's hitting different, and stick with us, because we're heading straight into the final truth. Let's finish this story together. The final confrontation didn't come with violence, the way it might have 20 years earlier, in the world Tae-Hyun had once built his identity around. It came with a quiet, devastating conversation between Tae-Hyun and the one man who could confirm every remaining piece. His father, now in his 80s, still sharp enough to understand exactly what his son had finally uncovered. "You buried your own son," Tae-Hyun said, standing in the doorway of the old family estate, 3 adult children waiting in the car behind him because they had insisted on coming, insisted on hearing this directly instead of secondhand. "You let me believe he was dead for 20 years. His father didn't deny it. That, more than anything, confirmed everything. "I did what was necessary to protect this family's future." "You mean your legacy?" "They are the same thing." "No," Tae-Hyun said, and for the first time in his life, he felt no need to raise his voice to be heard. "They stopped being the same thing the day you chose your legacy over your own children. I learned that the hard way, watching 3 kids grow up in my house who deserved better than what this family gave them." He didn't ask his father for an apology. He understood, standing there, that an apology wouldn't undo 2 decades of engineered grief, wouldn't return the childhood his brother had sacrificed, wouldn't give Maya, Noah, and Lily back the mother they'd lost to a lie disguised as illness. What mattered now wasn't extracting remorse from a man who had none left to give honestly. What mattered was what the 4 of them chose to do with the truth from here. That choice happened later that night, back at the house that had become, over 20 years, genuinely their home. The 4 of them sitting together in a living room that had witnessed every stage of their unlikely family, from a rain-soaked arrival to this exact moment. "We could expose all of it," Maya said. "Legally, publicly. Grandfather's done worse than this and gotten away with it for years." "We could," Noah agreed. "But is that actually what any of us want? Or is that just what feels like justice right now?" Lily, quiet until then, was the one who finally spoke the truth none of them had said aloud. "I don't want to spend my whole life fighting a war that started before I was even born. I want to know the truth. We deserved that. But I don't want the truth to be the only thing that defines us anymore." They chose, together, not forgiveness exactly. Their grandfather had earned none of that, and none of them pretended otherwise, but release. A refusal to let his choices continue shaping who they became. They chose to hold their father's memory honestly, grief and love and unanswered questions all at once, rather than let it calcify into either bitterness or myth. And they chose, without needing to discuss it, to keep choosing Tae-Hyun, not as an obligation born from an envelope 20 years old, but as the family they had actually built, argument by argument, ordinary Tuesday by ordinary Tuesday, one imperfect pancake breakfast at a time. The final scene circled back, quietly, to where it began. Rain against the windows of the same house, 20 years and 1 lifetime later. Maya, Noah, and Lily gathered in the study, no longer children clutching a single envelope in the dark, but adults who had chosen, deliberately and with full knowledge of every painful truth behind it, to remain a family. Tae-Hyun found the old envelope in the drawer where Maya had kept it all these years, the paper soft with age, his own name still visible in his brother's handwriting. "You still have it," he said. "I'll always have it," Maya said. "It's how we found you." "No," Tae-Hyun said quietly, setting it back down. "It's how you found where you belonged. You stayed because you decided to. That's different. That's better." Outside, the rain continued, the same rain that had once brought 3 frightened children to a feared man's door with nothing but a name and a hope neither of them fully understood yet. Inside, the 4 of them sat together in the quiet, no longer strangers bound by a stranger's dying wish, but a family bound by everything they had survived, uncovered, and chosen to become anyway. They had arrived at his door as strangers. They stayed because they became family. If this story moved you tonight, make sure you're subscribed for more, drop your favorite moment in the comments below, and give this video a like before you go. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. Thank you for staying until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.